Conspiracy theorists love to blame the government for everything. Well, hello everybody. It's almost Christmas. We have our tree up. Got the lights on it, but we don't yet have the ornaments. We'll get there. We'll get there. I've been wanting to do this video for a long time. And finally, I found the time to do it. So there's an increasing threat to our country. This wave of anti-intellectualism that's picking up steam in this country, with the rise of social media platforms giving a voice to fringe conspiracy theorists. So back in 2010, I posted this video on this channel about how to spot the International Space Station in the sky using NASA's live online tracker. And for the first 5 years that the video was up, all was well. I got positive comments, like, hey, thanks for posting this video. But then 2 years ago, the Crazy House escapees started making themselves known. And since then, I've been getting the most ridiculously boneheaded comments on that video. So I'm calling out all the crazy fringe conspiracy theorists. But let's get one thing clear. I'm not bashing people who believe in the more logical or plausible conspiracy theories. No, I'm calling out the people who fail to use facts, logic, and common sense when signing on to these crazy theories and then spreading their propaganda. So the kind of conspiracy theorists I'm calling out are people who believe in things like, let's see here, flat Earth, FEMA death camp underneath Denver Airport, geoengineered natural disasters, that the government is causing, hurricanes, fires, floods, that sort of thing, that 9/11 was faked, that the moon and stars are holograms, and that the government, get this, some people actually believe that the government is run by lizard people. So those are the kind of people I'm calling out. Then you have conspiracy theories like chemtrails, which is still an out there theory, but it's a little more plausible, even though chemtrails, isn't really a thing, just that people believe it is. Not necessarily calling those people crazy, even though some of them probably are. Or people that believe that there was a second shooter with JFK and that. Now let's get into why people believe in these conspiracy theories. So there's a number of reasons. One of them is the government's track record. So the government has certainly engaged in conspiracies throughout history, such as the CIA experimenting with mind control in the 1950s, or the Watergate scandal. And there, of course, are more than that. So because of these conspiracies, there's then a mistrust of the government. And just because these conspiracies happened, it doesn't mean the government is out to get us all and covering everything up. It's to our benefit and well-being in life to question things and have a healthy amount of skepticism. We shouldn't automatically believe everything that we're told, but we should believe things that have been proven, that have a rational basis, while at the same time keeping an open mind about things that aren't so certain. It's all about having balance. You don't want excessive gullibility, but you also don't want excessive skepticism. The best place to be for a rational person is right in the middle. Conspiracy theorists only exist at the opposite extremes of that spectrum, especially the fringe conspiracy theorists. They suffer from excess gullibility in areas that support their crazy theories, and then they suffer from excessive skepticism in areas that would debunk their theories. Another reason that people believe in these fringe conspiracy theories? Bias. And then also mental illness. So in any given year, 1 in 5 adults suffer from a mental illness. And then in any given year, 1 in 25 adults will suffer from some severe mental illness. 1 out of 100 people suffer from schizophrenia. But those are just the reported cases. There are probably a lot more than that. And then almost every person will suffer from some mental illness at some point in their lives. So mental illness is very common. Stupidity. 5% of the population has an IQ below 75. Lack of education, lack of knowledge. These tinfoil hat bozos don't even have basic knowledge on the subject that they're arguing about, or knowledge about the science behind their observations, or the facts, knowledge, common sense behind why their theories are false. If they simply had an understanding and education about how things really work, they wouldn't believe in their dumb theories in the first place. They seem to operate in their own alternative reality where the laws of physics and common sense don't exist. Mistrust of science. Conspiracy theorists don't believe in science. They think science is a bunch of lies. In fact, they even think that science itself is a conspiracy. Conspiracy theorists don't promote critical thinking. In fact, they do the opposite. They stifle critical thinking. Let's talk about how these people operate versus rational people. This is interesting. So let's start with rational people and how they operate. So they start with an observation or knowledge of some event that happened. Then they form a hypothesis. And then instead of jumping to a conclusion, they do investigative work while considering credible sources of information, gathering reliable evidence and facts, and using logic and reason when putting all that together. And then they finally reach a conclusion that's based on logic, facts, common sense, and then it all adds up to reliably support their conclusion. And then if all the evidence doesn't quite form the basis for a solid conclusion, then a rational person considers a theory inconclusive, and then they don't go around proclaiming their theory to be the truth. But, of course, this is not how the radical conspiracy theorist operates. So the radical conspiracy theorist also starts with an observation or knowledge of an event. But that's about where the similarities end. And then this is where their quirks become immediately obvious. So instead of doing any kind of investigative work, the fringe conspiracy theorist jumps straight to a conclusion. Oh, it must be aliens. Oh, it must be the government did this or the government did that. And then they skip right over the logic, reason, and fact-finding. They skip over all that stuff. And then they form a conclusion, but their conclusion is based on what the tinfoil hat freak wants to believe. So it's based on what they want to believe, not what the scientifically sound evidence and the facts of the situation point to. And then the wacko conspiracy theorist's childlike mind really begins to show when you challenge them on their theory. So what they'll do is they will then work backwards from their conclusion, and then they'll cherry pick irrelevant and alternative facts while they ignore the relevant facts. And they'll cherry pick the stuff using faulty or fabricated evidence. And they use their whimsical, wild imaginations for this. To come up with stuff and invent facts. Just using all kinds of incorrect information to suit their ignorant conclusions. And then sometimes delusions are involved as well. But the bottom line is they invent things to fit their conclusions. So instead of working forward from an observation to a conclusion or toward a conclusion, they work backwards from the conclusion to then try to justify their conclusion. Things get even more interesting when you argue with them and tell them why they're wrong. You show them the facts and they conveniently ignore those facts, or they just flat out deny them. No matter what facts and evidence you show them, their minds are already made up and they won't budge. And so they're completely immune to facts, logic, and reason. And their counter-arguments are usually flawed and nonsensical. If you ask them a question that by answering would debunk their theory, they'll beat around the bush, they'll avoid directly answering your question, and they'll come up with even more nonsense. The more they try to justify their ridiculous theory, the more of a fool they look like. The radical conspiracy theorist will reject everything the media says, everything the government says, and they'll reject everything science says. They really only believe their own observations and what their fellow nutcases are telling them. So in order to learn, the most about the world around us, relying on just our own observations is not enough. We need to accept or at least be open-minded to the discoveries made by those before us, and that includes science. And that's one area that these tinfoil hat freaks fall short. they can't accept anything that doesn't fit into what they want to believe. It's all about what they want to believe. And that also contributes to why they're stupid. They refuse to learn anything logical or factual. They're incredibly stubborn with their beliefs, no matter how much facts or evidence or logic or reason you throw at them. And these fringe conspiracy theorists love to blame the government for everything. Okay, so how do you spot these people? They exhibit traits of paranoia. They act like everyone's out to get them. They're constantly bringing up the government in conversations, and they live in fear. They also are very opinionated and seem overly certain about everything they talk about instead of coming across more humble. They also often call themselves truthers, which is incredibly ironic because what they promote is the complete opposite of the truth. And sometimes these truthers will have their own websites, which are very easy to spot. Their websites are very tabloid looking. The layout and design of their websites looks very amateurish. They don't seem to have any experience with website design. Sometimes their web pages have very tacky animated graphics, and they like to use a lot of bright colors. You'll also often see the word truth in their domain name. That's a dead giveaway, dead ringer right there. If it says truth, you can bet it's a wacko conspiracy nut. And they have a huge presence on social media, especially YouTube. So similarly, if the title of their videos have the word proof or truth in them, you can pretty well bet that you're dealing with one of these tinfoil hat crazies. So just remember, a radical conspiracy theorist is very arrogant, not humble, never admit they're wrong, and they always believe 100% in what they're saying. They never question their own beliefs. And they love to use and abuse the words truth and proof. They throw those two words around carelessly, and obviously without really knowing what those words mean. So why are radical conspiracy theorists bad for society? So you might be thinking, well, everybody has a right to their beliefs, and that's true. There are some opinions and beliefs that are just so off the wall that I can't accept them. Especially opinions that are wrong and have been proven wrong beyond a reasonable doubt. Like, we know that those ideas are not true. Like, for example, we know the Earth is not flat, so I can't respect these people's opinions that the Earth is flat. Okay, so why are radical conspiracy theorists bad for society? They fearmonger, spread fear to others. That's not a good thing. They spread myths and misinformation. That's really not good for society. And they even spread hate and mistrust. The more hate and mistrust there is in this world, the more unrest there's going to be in this world. And our society just doesn't need that. We don't need unrest. They're also not good for society because they aren't rational people. Irrational people not only don't benefit society, they hinder society. We as a human species are supposed to be evolving and making progress forward. But hardcore conspiracy theorists are holding us back. If these radical conspiracy theorists were running this world, look where we'd be. We'd be living in the Stone Ages with no science or medical advances. No advances in technology, since they believe science is so evil and lies to us. Another reason why radical conspiracy theorists are bad for society. They're hypocrites. They hate science so much that they're using a computer to voice their garbage. Well, what made computers even possible? Science. Science enables technological advances and inventions. Without science, the thing they hate so much, we'd have gotten nowhere. But they're using it, taking advantage of science every day while they're trash talking it. The same can be said about medical breakthroughs. Science has enabled better cancer treatments. Yet they hate science and think it's all a lie. Yet what do they rely on when they get cancer? Science, the thing they really hate. So when you boil it down, none of their traits are good for society. It's really a shame that Ronald Reagan started closing down the mental institutions decades ago. Now look at what we're left with, all these loonies running loose. It's too bad that with the advent of social media that these lunatics have a voice in this world. They have a platform now to spread their lies, misinformation, hate, and fear. The more they voice their misinformation and the more people they voice it to, the more that misinformation is going to start to become perceived as credible. That's not a good thing. Well, it's their legal right under the First Amendment, but their spreading of fear, hysteria, misinformation, hate, and hypocrisy is hurting society and contributing to this anti-intellectualism. Alright, so stay tuned for my next videos where I actually tackle individual conspiracy theories. I talk about each one in detail, so stay tuned for that.